Oh, you guys, let me welcome GrandDaddy Mike. GrandDaddy Mike
Hey, Stewart, great to be here.
is a well-known political as well as cannabis industry force to be reckoned with, and he shares with me a feeling that a better dialogue is needed on what we're going to do in 2016 here in California. Um, One of the loopholes that GrandDaddy pointed out to me that was not being addressed except by one of the ordinances or propositions, is this thing about interstate activity. And the one that handles it is
MCLR,
which
the
is
Marijuana Control, Legalization, and Regulate Act. It's currently being sponsored by the Americans for Policy Reform.
fine. So that's the one that has language in it that acknowledges that, what is it, about 80% of the marijuana that's grown here is going to other states, hopefully other legal states that have marijuana for medicine or for social use. And so the idea is that although federal law says that it's interstate commerce is federally illegal, there's no reason that California, when we create our rule, shouldn't adopt a law that's consistent with the reality, which is we want to decriminalize and regulate any activity of California medical marijuana manufacturing that does go interstate. As far as California is concerned, it should be defensible under the law we pass. The only one that considers this is the one that we just mentioned, and I will put the link at the bottom of this video. And they have an open source document. Do you happen to know the URL for the open source document?
Not off the top of my head.
Say it again, the good one that we were talking about. It's the
Marijuana Control, Legalization, and Regulate Act, MCLR, being sponsored by Americans for Policy Reform.
There we go. And so meanwhile, let's talk about some of the bullshit that's masquerading as decent advocacy. What's going on about some of these movement participants and ideas that you might have a criticism of?
Well, I think we're in the midst of, a threshold time in the regulation of policy reform efforts here in California. And I think most people have now come to realize something that many of us have noted for years, is that it's unity within our own industry that has sabotaged our efforts to present enough of consensus so that we could be successful in the past. And in trying to avoid that same repeat dilemma again, we're now in the process of trying to consolidate consensus values so that we can, as a unified industry, support a proposal. Now, frankly, I think it's unrealistic that we will have only one legalization on the initiative on the ballot in 2016. I expect that there will be a number of them. But the idea is that we should be united, and DPA has stepped forward with their $15 million commitment to this effort in the state of California. Now, this will be the first time that they've come in with big bucks in California. They've chosen to work in other states in the past, and there's some concern that they will delegate to a group like Reform California the responsibility for unifying the industry advocates, and they will go after the undecided third of the population with their poll-driven media campaigns to bring in the soccer moms and the Latino mothers and the other currently borderline groups, so that we can get enough actual votes to pass an initiative.
Right, but the problem is that the type of polling or the type of meetings that I saw and that I understand have been going on throughout the state don't really contain the elements of a true grassroots effort, and that they are specifically avoiding getting into language or proposing or showing language that they plan to back. Instead, they are generating consensus without any meaningful language, which reminds me of the Occupy movement. Unfortunately, if we have no stated goals, no leaders, no agreement about where we want to go, then those meetings are just building vague momentum for whatever is going to be imposed from the top down. And what's going to be imposed from the top down, if you don't get involved and we don't get involved more, is a top-down that you don't like, that's not going to support the mom and pops in the state of California. It's going to give this billion-dollar industry to big companies that have a vested interest in focusing things sort of back to big pharma, big alcohol, big tobacco, and the kind of one percenters that marijuana really gives an opportunity to benefit the 99%. And it's really a mom and pop phenomenon. We can keep that for the people of the state of California, or we can give it away. It's a really, really big political football. This is not just about, social marijuana, because it goes much further. It includes hemp and commercial and all the other things that we can do with this plant, industrial as well as medicine and social. So I love the fact that you asked a question when you went to the meeting, which was, what can I do after what's your proposal? How many plants can I grow in my backyard? How much marijuana oil can I create? What products can I create? What trademarks and business ideas can I exploit? Or is this just going to be maintained by those people who are what they define as stakeholders, however they shall redefine that word in the future?
And as we were talking before, getting back to the idea of reciprocity, I just want to loop back to that. If it's true, and I believe it is, that 80% of the production of cannabis products in the state of California is for the benefit of consumers outside of the state, then designing a program that is only intrastate legal, i.e. within California alone, will be developing a limited liability umbrella that will only cover 20% of our industry, and will still have 80% operating in the black market. And that's precisely what we want to avoid. And that 80% is not going to be compliant with the new program. And so the new program isn't going to generate the kind of tax revenues and licensing revenues that are projected for the whole industry, because the whole industry isn't going to be able to participate in it.
Right. Look at the bad example of Washington, where they created a large wholesale and a large retail tax. What the state of Washington wound up doing was creating a whole new black market. There's no reason to go to a store and pay $340 for an ounce of cannabis when your neighbor is selling it for $200, and your neighbor's not going to pay any taxes, and it's not going to work.
And I don't really mean to alienate anybody or put too much gasoline on the fire, but I frankly, from very deep philosophical and even, I would say, sacred beliefs, do not believe that cannabis consumption is a sin. And so I personally oppose any sin tax on cannabis as a product. I'm willing to pay sales tax, I'm willing to pay income tax, I'm willing to pay licensing fees and registration fees, I'm willing to be compliant with the program, but I do not want to pay a tax because other people want to express their totalitarian and repressive values on my consumption of cannabis. It's just too personal and too sacred to me to be, and I think in terms of the long-term path that we need to go towards legally integrating cannabis into our society, that is a step divergent from the direction. That is a misstep in our path. So anything that includes a sin tax for cannabis, or anything that doesn't recognize cannabis' medicinal value, that should be tax-free in its delivery, as far as I'm concerned, is a misstep in value and will lead to complications that we'll just put onto our children and grandchildren to have to sort out in the future.
Absolutely. One of the things that we don't want this new legislation to do is to create new crimes, new classes of trouble. Instead, we want to make a simple declaration about the rights of people to exploit this plant for whatever reasons they want to, really without excessive limitation, and then with just those reasonable regulations or taxes that we think are a fair trade-off to help support society. But I think it's really a bad idea to create new crimes, like it's this sort of neoliberal, neoconservative mindset that, we don't want to look like we're soft on crime, so what we'll do is at the same time that we legalize, let's create a whole bunch of new crimes. Like, let's say if you're under 21 and someone gives you marijuana, that's a big deal, a 4-year felony, whereas if,
if you're under 18, it's less of an offense?
It's outrageous. So in other words, we don't want to create new classes of crimes. And definitely 18 years should be the cutoff, not 21. Again, we don't need to try to pretend that there's a problem with using marijuana sensibly. In fact, it's a wholesome thing. When you look at the studies, wherever we have regulated or legal marijuana or medical, there's less opiate addiction, less overdoses, less crime, less suicides, less car accidents. I mean, come on,
more
people.
well-being, more healthfulness, more enlightenment,
We
more passivity, less aggression, less violence.
look at the money that they're making in the legal states where they're doing the best they can, even with onerous regulations. They're making lots of money. They're fixing some potholes. They're creating a source of regulation, taxation to support some minor, hopefully, regulation of marijuana. But we don't want to create multiple classes of criminals or new crimes or big commissions where people who have vested interests can now participate and lord over the marijuana phenomenon. We really want to let this thing loose among we the people, unlike the radio waves, the streets, the public utilities, the parks. Everything gets given away. The timber rights, the oil rights, the water rights. This is one thing that we the people can keep if we do it right.
If we do it right. One of the reasons I enjoy talking to you so much, Stewart, is when you stimulate ideas that I think need to be expanded, both in myself and in general awareness. The idea of creating new crimes through our own new initiative, just brings to reminiscence for me the many times where there has seemed to be some step towards liberalizing and accepting cannabis policy reform, and immediately after that step is taken, the authoritative enforcers come in real hard right at the edge of that line in order to define it and make it public and get some media play for it. And they're so rigid, so that always just outside of what is the new boundary that has been set by an initiative is where the authorities come in and do some of the most repressive and punitive enforcement actions. And it's simply to make and it's a statement of control by our government over our civil rights.
Yeah, and I think that what we see with cannabis is sort of the canary in the coal mine phenomenon. It's one thing, it's just potheads, but people don't realize the same authoritarian bullshit that sort of created the drug war is now creating the mass surveillance and the police state and the disrespect for police. When police are forced to enforce ridiculous laws, who can respect them? And when people in the cities and minorities are disproportionately arrested for things that are not a problem in Beverly Hills or other cities or areas, but there's a lot of results of this drug war that include the unfair racial and other things that are going on in this country, the way they treated Occupy. How can we let the police continue to get away with this kind of crap? I mean, we're Americans, and they've sort of systematically attacked each one of our Bill of Rights, and we are the generation, guys. This is our torch to hand on to our kids. Either we're going to maintain what our forefathers died for and gave us, or we're going to blow it. And marijuana is a very important issue, but it's just sort of symptomatic of what's going on with everything. We need to wake up as fast as the technology for controlling us expands, and faster. So what should people do next? What's the call to action here?
Well, yeah, you need to check this website and keep updated on other new developments as this policy reform effort moves forward. You need to empower yourself with education. You need to use that education in a positive cannabis conversation with someone that you don't know every day as your effort to just educate the population at large. You need to stand up for your individual civil rights, and you need to stand up for your cannabis access rights. And if cannabis already supports you in some way, whether it's as a patient or somebody who's in the industry who's actually getting financial support from the industry, now is the time for you to turn that around and support cannabis. And you need to support cannabis either with your vocal advocacy and your vote and your donations. So now is the time that you can empower the cannabis policy reform movement in California with all of those activities.
Yeah, if we blow it again, if we do another Prop 19 where the community is infighting and where we don't pass it, maybe we'll look at it again in 2020. Meanwhile, we're going to have another 4 years of people in jail and repressive rules.
There are people every day who are sitting in their living rooms when the door is broken down and a search warrant is served and people are thrown down and shackled up and carted away. And folks, don't think that that's not happening. That's happening every day in the state of California today.
And they break up families, and then what happens with those kids? The whole cycle is unbelievably bad. People get evicted, people are on the streets, Child Protective Service has kids, families are broken up, and now there's another generation of misplaced and displaced people. So we do need to do this year, and there are a lot of different people who are going to be representing ideas to you about the topic. So the purpose of this has been to open your eyes so that you have some minimum criteria in mind for what it is you're going to be demanding for your legalization here in our great state so that we can do something great with this resource. True?
Yes, absolutely true. And I hope you join me in realizing that we're reaching the end of our frustration tolerance level here. It's time for us to all activate. Come out of the closet, come out of the shadows into the light, join us all out here sharing the same kind of risks for the same kind of gains. Together we can make this happen.
That was fun.